digital transformations in mergers and acquisitions, collaboration between Oracle and AT&T, and digital transformation lessons from ChatGPT. Those are just three of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 188 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, and we help them reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And joining me is my co-host, as always, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you, and glad to have you here, the audience. Thanks for joining us here today. This is a weekly podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including ERP implementations and other types of enterprise technology initiatives. This is a tech agnostic view of the world, so we're not affiliated with any software vendors. We put out new episodes every Wednesday. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see past episodes and to keep up with current episodes along the way. Again, check out transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is the independent consulting firm that I mentioned before that I happen to work for. And it's also produced by Major Town Production. So thank you for being here today. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about, in our opening segment, the collaboration between Oracle and AT&T, which is a relatively new collaboration. And then we're going to talk about the digital transformation at the Atlanta airport in the United States and some of the lessons we're learning from that story that's unfolding. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about digital transformations in mergers and acquisitions and private equity-backed firms. So we're going to bring on a guest onto the show, Derek Selchow, who's a partner over at Monroe Partners. So he's someone that focuses on financial transformations within merger and acquisition type of situations, as well as PE-backed firms. So Derek and I will talk about some of the nuances of transformations in mergers and acquisitions. And by the way, even if you're not a company that's going through a merger or acquisition, or if you're not private equity backed, I still highly recommend you listen in on the discussion, because we're going to cover some things that are relevant to any sort of organization, but we're going to really hone in on what makes PE firms different. And the reason I want you to listen, even if you're not a PE backed firm, is because PE firms think differently. And quite frankly, they think a lot more effectively and strategically oftentimes about these sorts of projects. So there's a lot of good lessons learned, even if you're not in a PE private equity sort of situation. So be sure to stick around for that interview in just a few moments. And then later in the show, we'll talk about some of the lessons from our clients that we have from ChatGPT. So we sort of recently, I went through an exercise where I took my notes and I scrubbed the sensitive client name and other information, and I plugged it into ChatGPT to tell me what sort of themes and patterns AI picks up on in my client notes. So it's a really interesting exercise. We're going to play you a clip from that, sort of a summary of 8 things that ChatGPT taught me about our own clients. So be sure to stick around for that. But before we get to our guests and some of the other content, we also want to get to some social media questions that you've got for us here today. Darian, what do you have in store for us?
Yeah. So our first question today is, I still to this day don't get how implementation of ERP can fail this way. Even basic things that aren't working, it doesn't make sense. It's just data. They can do it module by module and pinpoint where things are going wrong. It's code after all. What's the big deal in it?
It's a great question. It's almost like a setup. I feel like that was a planted question from someone at Third Stage or something. Did you write that question? Is that really you that came up with this?
Maybe. I don't know.
No, it sounds like a setup, but it is a good question, because a lot of CIOs think this way too. A lot of executives oftentimes will think this way too, that, hey, it's just software. How hard can it be? We implemented this little piece of software, 20 years ago, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So why is going through an ERP implementation such a big deal? There's pre-configurations. All we have to do is move the data over, flip the switch, turn it on, and we should be good to go. And I think, first of all, that's a oversimplification of what the technical process looks like. I mean, there's a lot that goes into designing and building off-the-shelf software, even though in theory or on paper it sounds like it should be easy, because you should be able to just buy a piece of software, just like I turn on my phone and I've got apps on my phone and they just work. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to implement anything other than go to the app store and download it on my phone. It's totally different with enterprises because, first of all, you're talking about a lot more complex business processes. You're talking about all of your operations, all of your data throughout an entire organization, which is pretty complex. And secondly, the software itself is so flexible compared to like an app on your phone. An app on your phone does just a very limited number of things, predefined things, and you don't really change it. You don't really have the option to change it. But with ERP systems and enterprise technologies today, you can set up the most basic business process a number of different ways. And there's a lot of variation in how you set those processes and workflows up. So you have to define how you want to use the software, which modules you want. You have to clean up your data, move it over. You have to test the software. You have to integrate it to other systems. There's a lot of technical stuff that goes on to make a project successful. But even more challenging than the technical piece is the people adoption. How do you get people to actually use the software the way you want them to? And again, it's not as simple as saying, well, just, go to the app store, download it and start using it, which we all do every day, but it's different with enterprise technologies. It's a lot more complex. And so you've got to make sure people understand how to use the software. And then the other piece of that is your business processes. You need to make sure that however your business processes are today syncs up with how you're going to do things in the future. And oftentimes you're hopefully going to go through some changes, and you're going to change your processes, and you're going to change the way you've done things in the past. In some cases, you might just adapt to the way the software works off the shelf. In some cases, you might change the software to fit the way you want your business to run in the future if it doesn't do that off the shelf. So there's a lot of that business process work that has to happen up front as well. So when you add up all that stuff that goes into a project like this, you start to quickly see that it's not as easy as it sounds, for sure.
Yeah, that's fair enough, I guess. It's definitely not as easy as maybe it sounds. So maybe there is a big deal and it's not. What is the big deal in this?
Yes, exactly. That's a better way to answer it. Yeah, it is a big deal. So that's a short answer.
Yes. Our next question is, the points you raised did not make sense, man. They've been using SAP for 20 years. What are you talking about maturity?
Yes, and I think this was the failure, right? The case study on the Oracle implementation.
Yeah.
So on my YouTube channel, there's a video where I talk about Birmingham City Council out of Europe, and they're one of the biggest city councils and biggest government entities within the European region. And they recently tried to move from SAP to Oracle, and they failed. They spent, I think 6 times the budget and took a lot longer than they planned, and they aren't getting the business value out of it. The system isn't working the way it should have. So a pretty significant failure at this company or at this organization. And one of the things I said in my video is that they have a fairly high level of maturity in their use of SAP. And yes, they're using an SAP system that's about 20 years old. And when you talk about maturity, I'm not just talking in this case, obviously I'm not talking about the technology. The technology may not be that mature, but their adoption and usage of the technology is very mature. So they had customized the software. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but they had customized the software. They deployed it. It's been stable for 20 years. They've built the internal skill sets and competencies to manage that system. So that's what I mean by maturity. I'm not saying the technology is good or that the technology is cutting edge or mature. I'm saying their adoption of the technology is mature. So I get why he might ask that question of how could you possibly say that that's digitally mature when you're using an old system. But you don't just look at the system. You also have to look at some of the other dimensions of maturity, which is how well adopted it is, the skill sets you have, and whether or not they align with the system, how stable the system is, how integrated it is, how clean the data is. All that stuff factors into what digital maturity is.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man.
Yeah, I know. I just like when people call me man on social media. It makes me feel young again. Like, yeah, man, I'm cool.
Yeah, some good social questions, some good challenging ones maybe. So like challenging what we're saying or what you're saying in the YouTube videos, which can always be a good thing because then we can discuss why you're saying those things. So any questions or comments, please feel free to leave on any of our socials or Eric's socials on YouTube or Instagram, TikTok, anything like that. We can answer them on this podcast or any of our other podcasts. But We're going to switch gears here and get into our first article of the day.
Yeah, let's do. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into a couple of newsworthy topics. We're going to talk about the collaboration between Oracle and AT&T that's been newly formed. And we're also going to talk about this digital transformation that's happening at the Atlanta airport in the U.S. And I believe that the Atlanta airport is still the busiest airport in the U.S. If not, it's one of the most busiest and top 2 or 3 busiest airports in the U.S. So it's a pretty big deal that they're going through their transformation. I think everyone's a little sensitive about digital transformations in the travel space ever since the CrowdStrike thing a few months ago. So I'll be curious to learn more about that. And then after we talk about these newsworthy topics, we're also going to have Derek Selchow on the show. He's from Monroe Partners. He's going to be on the show talking about digital transformations and mergers and acquisitions, as well as private equity-backed firms. We'll also get into lessons from ChatGPT from related to some of our client lessons. So a lot more to cover. Be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. So I'm here with Dominic from Guru Solutions. Dominic, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Eric.
So can you start off by telling us a little bit about Gurus and who you are?
Yeah, so Gurus is a NetSuite ERP pure play reseller and consulting firm. We also have a strong iPaaS integration practice to help our customer connect NetSuite to their other best-of-breed system that they might be operating. So our founder, Martin McNicol, founded Gurus in 2005. But at that time, he had this vision that one day most new ERP would be cloud-based. So we serve a range of industries from distribution, manufacturing, software, services. Our typical customer size, they range from, say, a bit more than $10 million top line to a bit less than $1 billion top line. So really, we focus on mid-market. We also put our NetSuite expertise to good use recently by offering 2 in-house products on top of our NetSuite services. So the first one is Gurus BI, which is a BI solution specifically for a NetSuite user. And then we also develop a NetSuite to Google Sheet data exporter. So we've been around for about 20 years in a space that in fact is only 27 years old. So it's a quite big source of pride for us.
Yeah, big accomplishment in a space that a lot of companies don't last that long, and a lot of companies don't succeed the way you have. What are some of the Guru's differentiators and the things that make you different in the marketplace?
Yeah, so the first one is obviously we specialize in only one NetSuite ERP, and doing that for so long, being pure play for so long, it creates a lot of depth. So that expertise allows us to fine-tune NetSuite to meet the exact customer needs. We also crafted and established methodologies in practice that are specifically tailored for mid-sized companies so that we can deliver project efficiently for that type of size companies. One thing that is also a big differentiator for us is the investment we make in our staff. We see that in the ERP world and consulting firms, people rely heavily on, say, freelancers, subcontracting, offshoring, and we do none of that. All our staff is permanent Gurus employees, and they're all based in North America. We also invest heavily in them, for their training, all their certifications. So we even went to the extent of developing our own Gurus Academy to make sure that we onboard all Gurus consultants and staff, and we also keeping up to date with all the latest and greatest of the platform we carry. So we are known also for our customer commitment, or our commitment to customer satisfaction. We like to build long-term relationship with our customer because, and I know you know that, Eric, but typically the go live is just the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. So we want to keep close to our customer after their go live. But we also want to make and always make what's good for our customer. And because of that, we do something that is a bit unusual we've seen in consulting firms. So our consultant, for example, they do not have an individual billable quota or target or anything like that. So this allows them to focus on what needs to be done for the customer and nothing else.
Yeah, so a good balance of focusing on your customers and your internal team as well, which is great.
Yeah.
What kind of companies should be speaking with Gurus when choosing a new ERP system?
So we already mentioned that, but we definitely have a strong focus on mid-market. So typically what we've been serving is company that are reaching the mid-market size and they are outgrowing their current software, say accounting software package, and they are ready to embark into a full-blown ERP. So this is definitely our bread and butter. We also have developed a very strong focus on private equity back carve-out. So when a private equity buy a piece of another bigger companies and they need to bring them live on a new ERP. So typically those projects, you have very strict deadlines. These deadlines are imposed by the transfer service agreement or TSAs. And in those situations, you have no choice but to go live at the given date. And we've been very successful at doing some of those projects for some of the well-known private equities backed companies.
Great.
So that's for size. In terms of industries, we work with a variety of industries. I would say tech companies, we're the one running SaaS-based or subscription model. They have AV, revenue recognition, billing requirements. And also with our Goose BI, we've been able to develop some of the important dashboard for those companies like, churn or AR evolution. So these are very important for them. So we have a strong forte for those. And automatically it leads to service companies because these days a lot of those SaaS companies, they also offer services either for implementing their own software or helping their customer with the software. So automatically created also a forte for service-based company. So and then it encompasses everything from law firms to accounting to consulting, but also those SaaS companies. We have done good projects for online retailers, not necessarily with the NetSuite platform itself, but online retailers that looks to implement NetSuite as their both financial and inventory management solution, but want to connect that to their best of breed e-commerce platforms, say like Shopify, BigCommerce, and things like that. So those type of retailers, online retailers, we love to do project for them. But one thing I would say, one type of customer that really benefit to talking to gurus are the customers that are running, I call that a unusual business process or outside the beaten path. So, companies are a bit more diversified and creative than say that some ERP vendors would like to tell us. Say companies that are running royalty-based or commission-based type of reselling. Engineering to order, which is kind of strange combo between manufacturing and project. So because we have a deep expertise in NetSuite, we've been able to fine-tune NetSuite install to cater to those customers that are sometimes falling outside the out-of-the-box leading practice of that are coming out of the box with ERPs.
Right. Now, speaking of leading practices and best practices, is there anything special about your delivery methodology that you'd share with us?
Well, we named it Sherpa, and we're pretty happy with this name and proud of it. So the reason why we called it Sherpa is that we wanted to highlight that when we implement an ERP with a customer, that's exactly what we do, with the customer and not for the customer. So it's basically a direct analogy to those Sherpas, the guides that are helping alpinists in the Himalayas climb a mountain. I never seen a Sherpa climbing the mountain for his customer. I always seen Sherpa climbing with his customer. And especially at the mid-market level, when you think about that, ERP implementation is very intrusive and fundamental to the business operation. So there's very little chance of success if you do it for the customer rather than to do it with the customer. So we try to capture that exact aspect with Sherpa, and it's typically in the work sharing. How do we share the work and how we define how the work has been shared? What we've seen is, unfortunately, how these millions of micro tasks that are needed to do when you implement an ERP, sometimes they are not well defined who owns what. And this is unfortunately the root cause of many well-known ERP implementation failures. So we try to make it very clear. And at the mid-market level, our customer loves to roll up their sleeve and do the work. So typically they end up doing 50% of the work themselves. Obviously, we can adapt. Some customers are a bit more budget sensitive and have a very strong internal team, so they will take on more. Some other customer might be strapped for resource, a bit more leeway in the budget side, and then we will take on more. But at each and every time, it's always clear who does what.
Right. Yeah, and really partnering with your customers on the journey sounds like a big part of your philosophy, which allows them to have ownership of the project as well.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, we love when they use our service post go live, but we also want them not to need
Right. Not to be
hostage
too
of us.
right. Not to be too caught up in it. Now, if we ask customers about gurus, what would they say about you at the end of a project? Or what do they say?
They would definitely talk about our proactive communication during the project, and I would say especially our transparency in the pre-sales aspect. And in our space, dealing with a sales organization, this is not always the case. So we love both during the project to share the good news, the progress, but we are never shying away also from the bad ones and raising the flags when needed.
Right.
Also, our customer loves the fact that we take a little bit more time to understand their specific industry challenge and business processes. This results in tailored ERP solutions that meet their exact need with just the right amount of customization to strike this balance, between leveraging the out-of-the-box features, but also capturing their unique differentiator and competitive advantage.
Well, thank you for that overview, Dominic. That was a great, good background of gurus, and appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. This is Eric Kimberling. I'm with Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also subscribe to the show on whichever platform you prefer by just checking out transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also just stream it directly from that website too, if you prefer. And you can also go see all past 185 plus episodes that you may have missed over the last 3.5 years. We've had a lot of great guests on the show, so be sure to check it out there. So, Darian, we've got a couple of newsworthy topics we want to cover today related to Oracle and AT&T, as well as Atlanta's digital transformation at their airport in Atlanta. What have you got in store for us today?
Yeah, so our first one, like you said, is the collaboration between Oracle and AT&T. This is basically to enhance Oracle's enterprise communications platform, otherwise known as ECP, by integrating AT&T's Internet of Things, or IoT, connectivity and network APIs. This integration aims to provide Oracle's industry cloud application to customers with seamless IoT device management on the AT&T network, leveraging 5G technology. This partnership is designed to simplify complex integrations and network contracts for customers, enabling a range of new industry applications and services, including those in public safety, telehealth, and automated utility management. This collaboration is described as co-creation at its best, highlighting the potential for innovation across various industries. Eric, with what do you think this significant strategic alliance between Oracle and AT&T's IoT connectivity and network APIs into their enterprise communication platforms, and how might this impact Oracle's position in the cloud services market?
Well, I think it's an extremely smart move because a couple of things. One is, you talked about Internet of Things and how capturing data in the field is so important to get back to your ERP system. And just for those that don't know, Internet of Things is essentially all the data that's being captured in different things outside of an office environment. So if you think about, in an office, like I'm sitting in an office right now, Darian's in the office, we're all kind of at our computers. Information is being captured in a pretty central place when we enter stuff in our laptop. But when we're out on a factory floor and there's a robot producing stuff or doing stuff on the shop floor, there's data that's being captured by their robot. Same with all the warehouse workers when they're scanning stuff in the warehouse, scanning a inventory they pull off the shelf, or scanning a box before they ship it off or put it on the truck or whatever. The trucks themselves, when they're shipping stuff, those trucks have devices that are tracking their location and where they're at, and their the load, the volume, all that stuff. And so you think about all this data being captured throughout the field, outside the office. That's what Internet of Things essentially is. Another way to think of Internet of Things is if you look at like your Apple Watch, for those that wear a smart device or smart watch, or even just your iPhone or your smartphone, there's data being captured about you on that device, and that essentially is Internet of Things. There's all this data out there, and so what Internet of Things does is it captures data, out non-traditional places, I'd call it. So with ERP software, though, ERP software has traditionally been like a back office thing that sits in a server or nowadays in the cloud. But even so, it's more for finance people. It's more for entering data on a computer, that sort of thing. And it doesn't always capture the data that exists via Internet of Things. So now with this relationship between Oracle and AT&T, they're creating this mechanism in a more seamless way to integrate the data that's out in the field with what might be being captured in more of a sort of a central office environment. Which is a pretty big deal, because not only is it giving you better access to the data, but it's especially important for organizations that operate in rural areas. So if you're in a rural area, you're probably not going to have high-speed Wi-Fi within your manufacturing shop floor. You're not going to have the cutting edge, Wi-Fi that's going to allow you to capture that data and integrate it back to your system. But now with this AT&T relationship, it sounds like they're sort of extending the reach of Internet of Things and the reach of how they can capture data in the cloud and make sense of it via a core central system via Oracle. So I think it's a smart move. I think it can enable a lot of Industry 4.0 and Industry of Things or Internet of Things sorts of trends that are happening right now in the marketplace.
For sure. So when you say this is a very smart collaboration between Oracle and AT&T, how do you see this having the potential to reshape industries that heavily rely on IoT, such as healthcare, utilities, and public safety?
Well, just the mass amounts of data that Internet of Things entails. And you mentioned healthcare. You think of a hospital. A hospital is constantly capturing data about patients and even inventory and things like that. But you think about patients and all the data it's capturing on patients. That's a great way to take that data and bring it off whatever local device they might be capturing that information and bring it into the cloud, ERP system. So it's really a way to sort of extend the reach of how that data gets captured and brought back to a central cloud location.
For sure. Switching kind of to Oracle focus now here, what do you think the long-term implications of this partnership might be for Oracle's competitors? Could this drive similar collaborations in the industry between other competitors?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that more software companies haven't done this, because we deal a lot with companies in rural areas that don't have, reliable Wi-Fi, or in many cases we have international clients. For example, we have a client that we worked with that had 80 different locations throughout the world, and they're a nonprofit that's government funded. It's a U.S. based company, but they're basically a USAID company. So they're financed by the U.S. government to provide assistance to other countries. And so they'll set up, for example, they'll build a hospital in like a really remote area in Western Africa. And there's just not good, you're not going to get really super high speed Wi-Fi out there to capture data. And so they were implementing Microsoft Dynamics 365, and D365 is based in the cloud. And one of the biggest challenges of that implementation was that they were trying to deploy it in places where they just didn't have internet connectivity, and the cloud doesn't work very well when you don't have internet connectivity. That's one of the downsides of the cloud, is you've got to have reliable internet access. So in order for cloud systems to really make sense and to be totally reliable and to be fully leveraged to their full potential, you need to have very reliable network access. And a lot of parts of the world still don't have that. I know, as you and I sit here in metropolitan Denver right now, Darian, it's hard to imagine who's not going to have Wi-Fi. Well, a lot of the world still doesn't have Wi-Fi. So believe it or not, and a lot of people don't have access to reliable Wi-Fi. So you've got to have a way to reach, some of these different areas where data is being captured.
So does this really give Oracle then some sort of competitive advantage over a lot of other cloud systems?
At least for now, at least, until others replicate that, whether it's with AT&T. I don't know if they've got an exclusive arrangement with Oracle, or if AT&T could also provide that same service to other vendors. And, AT&T is primarily, I think they're just primarily in North America, but, you think about Vodafone and some of the other, European and other worldwide internet or cellular providers and network providers. There's a lot of options out there. So I imagine, all the ERP vendors, I think at some point will probably want to have that sort of relationship, at least until Wi-Fi becomes more universal.
For sure. That makes sense. I mean, it's a super interesting article. I think like you said, the collaboration between them seems like a really great, smart move. And I'll be interested to see, like you said, if there's more partnerships that we'll see in the future between other vendors and cellular networks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, our next article today is about Atlanta International Airport. Like you said, one of the busiest airports in the US, if not the busiest, and how they're undergoing a major data transformation to enhance operational efficiency, improve traveler experience, and drive revenue to the airport by implementing a centralized business intelligence dashboard powered by Databricks, Data Lake, and Microsoft Power BI. The airport has already achieved an 80% improvement in time to insight. This transformation is set to expand with a focus on data governance, machine learning, and generative AI, allowing the airport to automate tasks, optimize resource allocation, predict asset management needs, and enhance decision-making across various departments. The ultimate goal is to transition from reactive to proactive operations, leading to better utilization of airport resources, improved passenger services, and increased non-aeronautical revenue. How important is it for large organizations like airports in this case to have a single source of truth for their data? For what challenges might they face in achieving effective data governance at this scale?
Well, I think for any organization, data is really important, especially since Atlanta Airport and other organizations are talking about AI. And in order to fully leverage AI to its full potential, you're going to need to have good data. So it's relevant whether you're an airport or not. I imagine, airport are such big, sprawling operations with so much volume of data being captured and data that needs to be managed, both financially and when you look at inventory management and staff scheduling, crews, maintenance, all that kind of stuff that an airport does. There's just a lot of data that gets captured there. And even when you look at, like, we worked with an airport in Australia recently, and one of the big challenges they had with their ERP implementation was capturing data related to their tenants, people that are renting space at the airport, and being able to sort of manage the finances of the, call it the real estate operations, because airports generally have fairly significant real estate footprints and real estate management types of needs. So there's a lot that goes into it, from maintenance to real estate to finance to customer experience, all kinds of stuff. So I could see how technology could really hopefully make airports a better place. Since we at Third Stage spend a lot of time at airports, that's a breath of fresh air for sure.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the key factors that airports should consider when integrating machine learning and generative AI into their operations? And how can these technologies help in predicting and managing their airport resources more effectively? Like they said, they want to get away from being reactive to situations that occur at the airports.
Well, it's funny you asked that, because I was going to ask you about the generative AI piece of it. That caught my attention, because I thought, well, how is an airport going to use generative AI? I just don't know, to be honest. So it's more of a lack of knowledge on my part and a lack of understanding of airport operations. But so I'll set aside Gen AI, because I don't know how an airport would use that, but it sounds intriguing. I'd be fascinated to know more about that. But as far as AI in general and sort of more the predictive sides of things, I think it could have a huge potential to really make airports run a lot more smoothly, because you think about, how when you're at the airport, it just seems like randomly there's just this huge line in a certain queue or whatever. And it's just like, and people don't notice, people that work there don't really notice that there's a line forming, and they're not the best at like getting on top of it, say, okay, let's figure out how to optimize this bottleneck we've got here. I could see AI potentially helping people at airports better anticipate that, if there's a way to leverage data to say that, hey, there's this wave of flights that are happening at this certain time, and we know that this window prior to that time of high volume of flights, we know that that's going to be a bottleneck. And using AI to sort of recommend how things are staffed and where staff should be within an airport at any given time. I think there's a lot that a lot that AI can provide there. So that's how I could see AI in general working. At generative AI, though, I have no idea how an airport would use that, but sounds pretty cool though.
Yeah, it does. That's a good idea, definitely for how maybe they can get a little bit more organized, or just expect waves of crowds earlier than before. Last question about this is, how crucial is collaboration between airports and tech companies like Microsoft and Databricks in driving successful digital transformation? And what are the key factors for maintaining this sort of productive relationship?
Well, I do think it is important that any organization has a strong relationship with their tech providers. But I think in the case of an airport, because airports are just different, they're unique. There's not a ton of them. I mean, I know there are a lot of airports throughout the world, but there's not, when you compare it to like a manufacturing company or a services company, there's not thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of examples out there that, that tech companies can use to build their R&D. So in many cases, I imagine Atlanta Airport and other airports throughout the world are going to be more on not the bleeding edge, but they're going to have to create solutions that are specific to them more so than companies in other industries. So I think that collaboration and partnership with your software vendor is very important in this case, especially if we assume that they're going to have to create some solutions that are somewhat custom to airport operations.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think any sort of technology that you can add to the airport to make it more efficient and easier for the people going through airports to get through, everything like that, I think is a win in my book, at least. Make it a little bit simpler to travel. But yeah, like you said, I think that especially for airports that are some of the busiest in the world, they don't have necessarily old examples besides for maybe just the other airports that are the busiest in the world.
Right.
For example, like Atlanta Airport's not going to take advice from like an airport in North Dakota. It's just not at the same scale for busyness and everything like that. So yeah, like you said, I think it's interesting. They kind of have to come up with their own solutions. And I think we're starting to see that now, especially with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Be fun to see where they go with that. Be fun to check in on that case study here in a few months or years out when they start to deploy some of this technology in a broader way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Well, good. Well, thanks for sharing those newsworthy topics. That was a good discussion. Good to see how companies are using new technologies, and also interesting to hear about that relationship between Oracle and AT&T and how that affects Internet of Things. So great stuff there. And we're going to shift gears and bring on our next guest. His name is Derek Selchow. He's with Monroe Partners, or West Monroe Partners. And he is going to be on to talk about digital transformations in merger and acquisitions, as well as in private equity-backed firms. So we're going to bring him on here in just a moment. We're going to have him on to talk about that. And then later in the show, stick around even after the interview with Derek, we're going to have a discussion around lessons from ChatGPT as it relates to organizations going through transformation. So I plugged in my notes, which are very detailed. I plugged them into the ChatGPT model after I scrubbed the sensitive client information, of course, client names and all that good stuff. And then I had ChatGPT tell me, what are the major themes? What are the major lessons from my notes? And I've, again, lots of notes that I can't analyze on my own other than qualitatively. So I asked ChatGPT to do it for me, and this is what it told me. That's what we're going to get to later today. So be sure to stick around. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space, and she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance, You'll get real results, so you'll get some tangible results from the program, and you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And the show is sponsored by Major Tom Productions. So be sure to learn more about both those companies. And I'm excited for our next guest, who's a first-time guest on the show. His name is Derek Selchow. He's with West Monroe Partners, and he's in their financial transformation practice. And he's going to chat with us about digital transformations in merger and acquisition and private equity-backed firms. And even if you're not a company that is owned by a PE firm, or even if you're not a company that's going through mergers or acquisitions, or even if you're a company that's not high growth for that matter, no matter what kind of company you are, this is a really good conversation we want to get into here today, because I think a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be very relevant to any sort of organization, regardless of whether you're PE backed or not. And the reason I say that is because PE firms tend to have a pretty unique view of the world and a very black and white view of how digital transformation should look, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But there's a lot of good things that you can learn from the way PE firms and companies going through a merger or acquisition, the way they think about digital transformations is unique to them, but it shouldn't be unique to them. A lot of organizations, I would argue, should be thinking more like a PE firm or more like a company that's trying to maximize value as part of their transformation, because too oftentimes companies just get stuck in implementing technology for technology's sake rather than focusing on where's the value. And that's what a big part of what we want to talk about here today. So joining us here to talk about digital transformations and ERP projects in mergers and acquisitions and PE-backed firms is Derek Selchow from West Monroe Partners. Derek, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Eric. Great to join you on this topic today. I'm really excited. So Derek Selchow, Managing Director with a firm called West Monroe Partners. We're a middle market management and technology consulting firm. I have a couple different practice areas, but specifically I work within the financial management space. That's kind of all things back office, ERP, finance transformation, based in Minneapolis.
Great. Yeah, great to have you. And we've sort of circled the same circles within the industry, and you and I tend to see each other at industry conferences and whatnot, and that's how we've gotten to know each other. So great to have you finally on this podcast. This is your first time here, so thanks for being here today.
Absolutely.
So maybe before I jump into these questions I have for you about just general trends in mergers and acquisitions and private equity, before I get to that, tell us a little bit about just how did you end up in the space? Like, how did you end up focusing in, not only landing at West Monroe, but sort of honing in and focusing on M&A type of consulting that you do?
Yeah, great question. All my colleagues love this joke, but I'm a recovering accountant. So there's a recovery program for people in finance. It's called consulting. So started my career in corporate finance. And when I graduated undergrad, I'm not going to disclose the year, it'll show my age, but it was in the prior millennium. I double majored in finance and MIS, and all of my classmates looked at me with kind of a raised eyebrow, and they're like, "What are you going to do with that? Why can't you pick a lane? Either pick computer science or pick finance." I was like, "I don't know. They both interest me, and I think that there's like something to be made of technology plus finance, right?" And so in one of my first roles in corporate finance, I was actually the liaison for our finance department to IT in managing our ERP and our financial reporting systems. So I've always kind of kept a foot in both sides of the fence, and then was contacted by a recruiter a few years later saying, we're looking for an ERP consultant. And I was like, you can actually make a living like consulting on ERP systems? That's kind of weird, but interesting. So I took a leap and have never looked back. So spent 10 years implementing the Dynamics stack of ERP systems, and then one thing kind of led to another. Got into a little bit of business intelligence and data warehousing, then met some folks that my client was going through a merger of themselves, and met some practitioners from West Monroe, and the rest is kind of history, and kind of fell into M&A consulting, but still with that focus on finance in the back office.
Yeah, really leveraging that core accounting foundation you built early on. Weird but interesting. That's a good way to describe our industry. Weird but industry, or weird but interesting. I'm going to start using that if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is a good way to describe it. Well, that's interesting. So when you look at some of the work you've been doing over the last few years, and as you sort of look to the future here and where we are today as well, what are some of the general trends you're seeing in the M&A and private equity space, just in general?
Yeah, great question. I think if we just kind of rewind the clock to 2023, it was a little bit of an odd year for private equity, especially with, kind of higher than normal interest rates, and still kind of coming out of the pandemic and all sorts of world events. The private equity environment kind of cooled for a little bit, and it turned everyone's focus not so much to just a single core asset purchase, standalone company and grow it, improve it, and sell it. There really had to be kind of a special case, because in the world of higher interest rates, it meant the private equity firms were actually putting more equity in than debt to make the model work. And so when we look at some of those special cases, maybe it's a distressed asset, maybe it's a underperforming asset, or maybe it's a tuck into an existing portfolio company to try to make something greater than the sum of the parts, right, so to speak. And so that's kind of how we came out of 2023 with a lot of what I would call kind of a little bit, not odd, but like just not your run-of-the-mill kind of M&A transactions. There had to be kind of a special factor in there. And how now coming into 2024, we're really seeing a significant uptick in a couple of areas. One is in residential services or just services in general. So whether it's HVAC, electrical, home improvement, solar, like all kinds of services businesses, because they are somewhat recession proof in a way. Everyone needs kind of those products, those repairs. A lot of domestic manufacturing, food and beverage. There's a lot of consolidation going on in food and beverage. But one of my favorite areas that we've really seen an uptick in is carve-outs. So just imagine a business unit, part of a larger, probably strategically owned business unit, being carved out and then purchased by either a portfolio company or a private equity firm, to, again, try to value creation is kind of the name of the game, make something greater than the sum of the parts. So those are some of the trends we've been seeing lately. So the thing with carve-outs, they're complex, they're messy. That's what I thrive on.
Right.
And you have a very limited timeline to execute on those projects.
Yeah. I'm actually going to come back to that if you don't mind. I wasn't planning on asking you about that, but that's a good point of focus here in a second. But maybe before I ask you more about the carve out concept and how transformations might look different in a carve out situation. If we look at M&A sorts of situations in general, where a company has either gone out and acquired other companies and or merged with another company or companies, digital transformations are oftentimes a part of that value creation that you talk about. So I know in general, you and I have talked a lot about digital transformations and ERP projects in general. There's a lot of, best practices and lessons learned that you and I both have just from having done this for so long. But when you look at M&A types of environments or PE backed firms in particular, how do digital transformations look different? Do they have different priorities, different challenges? How would you sort of compare and contrast that?
Yeah, great question. I think what it all really kind of comes back to is every acquisition or M&A deal begins with an investment thesis, from the sponsors, from the backers. And we like to kind of work with that investment thesis because that's the why. Why are they pursuing this asset? Why are they pursuing this merger or this carve out? Because that can really be the guiding light of, where they perceive that there's value in this asset or this transaction. And so we like to kind of use that as the springboard to kind of justify the why behind their digital transformation. Because just doing it because it's the right thing to do isn't really a good enough reason to undertake a kind of a massive transformation or a massive digital transformation. There's got to be a different why behind it, right? And it comes back to that value creation. And I know our industry is full of all sorts of jargon and terms like this, but by focusing on the value creation, by putting together a transformation program, that really also helps the stakeholders at this company that's going to go through this transition, helps them stay aligned and focused on why are they pursuing this. And it helps really with the change management of getting everybody behind the idea, behind the reasons why they're pursuing this digital transformation. But I would say another unique factor, specifically in the private equity world, is timelines. Timelines are not infinite. In this world, there's a hold period, and you typically need to get some of these bigger initiatives done within a prescribed hold period so that you're not mid-flight with, kind of the change or the chaos if you're going to go through another M&A event, right? So time is of the essence. And then these firms also have a business to run. They don't want to be going through a perpetual implementation that's just kind of never ending. So it's an adjustment for some of us because we always want to do our best work and kind of execute on the best project and have the best processes and everything else. Sometimes it means minimum viable product and you plan for an optimization down the road. Sometimes you go with good enough or use what you have at your disposal. So it's different than just a typical project. There's other kind of constraining factors there.
Yeah. What about in the context of a PE firm or a PE firm that's involved that has an investment in a company and their stated intent is to sort of create that value and flip the company and sell it in, say, 3 to 5 years? They're going to sell the company in 3 to 5 years. Does that influence the type of technology you do or don't deploy or the risk they're willing to take, knowing that they might sell the company to a parent company that uses a totally different technology or something like that? How do you address that or navigate that reality in a PE situation?
Yeah. In some cases in our world, you really have to kind of get your magic 8-ball out and or your oracle or whatever term you're going to use and try to predict the future. Because the other thing that we do know about this space is that these portfolio companies that we begin working with are unlikely to remain static. They're going to probably, in a 5-year hold period, tuck in 3, 4, 5 acquisitions maybe. Or maybe, sometimes the thesis is we're going to buy this asset, but we're actually going to split it into 2. And maybe one's a products business, one's a services business. And maybe that's the theory or the thesis, right? So everything kind of comes back to this thesis. So you have to try to get comfortable with kind of predicting the future and what might happen. And that really comes to life. We have a technique we use, we build a playbook. And it's kind of somewhat the break glass in case of emergency type of playbook of if this happens, then now we're going to follow this different workflow, right? Mm-hmm. And to your point, if the eventual exit plan is to go to a strategic, and we're specifically talking about ERP, then let's just pretend that they're a manufacturer and we expect the exit to be a strategic buyer, and maybe they're in a kind of a regulated space like aerospace and defense or something like that. You're unlikely to go with the cream of the crop, top line, SAP, do it perfectly, every best tool off the shelf, because in all likelihood, if a firm like that's going to get acquired by a strategic, they're going to get rolled into parent company at the end of the hold period when that transaction goes through. So you don't really want to kind of gold plate everything, knowing they're eventually going to have to change again. So sometimes that's where you kind of pick the middle of the road, and go with good enough in some cases, depending on what it is.
Good enough and easy enough to rip out and replace with something else.
Exactly.
The parent company might sort of impose on the acquisition. I'm here with Derek from West Monroe Partners. We're talking about digital transformations and ERP implementations in mergers and acquisitions, as well as private equity-backed firms. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. Just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes that we've ever published, going back to early 2021, episode 1. You can see it all there at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Derek Selchow talking about mergers and acquisitions and digital transformations in private equity-backed firms and ERP implementations of private equity-backed firms. I've got a lot more questions I want to get to, so let's jump back into it. Now, you mentioned a moment ago, Derek, carve-outs. And, you know, for those, maybe just for real quickly, for those that maybe don't know what a carve-out is, could you describe what a carve-out is and then maybe how that looks different in the world of digital transformation?
Sure. So basically, what a carve-out is imagine maybe a multi-product or multi-business unit organization. Maybe it has various product lines or various plants or locations. And that company has decided that, you know, this particular product line or division is going to get carved out. Basically, you can imagine putting it in a box, and then that asset is going to be sold to a new buyer, whether they're a strategic, meaning another company, another corporation, or private equity, and be stood up on its own. So again, those all kind of start with kind of a thesis, meaning, you know, we are just wrapping up one that is a carve out of a brand within a larger kind of conglomerate, and it's going to be tucked into an existing platform company that has similar products. So it's going to become part of that other organization. Sometimes it's a carve out to standalone, meaning we carve the business unit out and make an entity, a company out of that carved out business unit, and they run standalone on their own. And how that typically comes to life from a digital transformation perspective is, depending on the terms of the carve out, the parent company might elect to, they all elect to write what's called a transition services agreement. So that's basically a contract that we will support you or support this business unit for X period of time while you get your house in order and stand up your own systems and your own processes. So the terms within that can mean, yes, will allow you to kind of clone the operational systems because they are running like a top right now and we don't want to disrupt anything, and we're amenable to like selling you our licenses for whatever platforms that we do have. And sometimes it's a completely, you need to figure it out, find your own tools, your own systems. You're not taking any of the tooling with you as part of the carve out. And sometimes it's a mix in between. And so that's really where our role comes in, is all of that kind of carve out planning of, okay, we don't get to take any of the tools with us. We get to take our data with us, of course, because that belongs to that asset. So we basically, in a 9 to 12 month period, need to build a company from scratch. And that's what I find was really fun about those types of transactions, is because you don't get many chances in your career to build a company from the ground up, but it's an established company. We can then take that chance to establish all the best practices, pick the best tooling, not the best ever, the best that's going to fit that business unit and get the transaction done in that period of that TSA arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah. If you imagine like a big multinational company that, let's just say they're running SAP, they're on S4HANA, and now all of a sudden they take $1 billion of revenue in this one business unit, they're going to sell it off to someone else. Just untangling that, from the assuming they implemented like a single system that spans the entire enterprise, untangling that and unwinding that and figuring out how you're going to let that company stand alone. I imagine that's a pretty challenging proposition.
It is. There's a lot of moving parts, and depending on the industry type, there could be regulatory considerations. There's sometimes, process considerations. If it's a highly engineered kind of manufacturing type of environment, there's a lot of operating technology that has to be kind of sorted out. And so it's not always just about ERP, but a lot of moving parts, and you got to get moving usually pretty quickly.
Yeah. Here's a question from Darian, just building on something you mentioned a moment ago, Derek. This is from Darian on LinkedIn. She says, how do you see technology supporting these sorts of companies when compared to non-private equity firms? So like, in other words, what are the main differences, would you say, in terms of how you use technology, the types of technology you use in these sorts of situations, that sort of thing? How would you sort of summarize those differences?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of the main differences is it comes in a couple different forms. There's a certain risk tolerance that's different between PE and I'll keep calling them strategics. A strategic meaning an established corporation of any type of ownership structure. There's a certain risk tolerance. There's a certain tolerance for, I would even say, kind of inefficiencies, right? If it's an existing strategic acquiring a business unit, they don't have the time pressure a lot of times to hurry up and execute on these transitions. And a lot of times we'll want to fold them in to their existing operations that are very well established, probably have all kinds of SOPs and process documentation. But from a choice of technologies, again, when you're looking at a strategic versus a PE-owned, there's probably less, kind of going out to market to kind of choose the best solution. An established strategic buyer tends to have a lot of those things already kind of sorted out, already in their wheelhouse. Versus in a PE world, it's really, again, it comes back down to time and cost and value creation. So we tend to see a lot more, kind of software selections and kind of analyzing the best fit and kind of picking the best product to fit this kind of standalone entity versus going into an established environment where there's policies and procedures and a lot of that stuff established already. It doesn't really, I would say it doesn't really affect the technology itself, more so the plan and the strategy around these transitions that these companies are going through.
Yeah. with the exception maybe of what you were saying before about, using your magic 8 ball to figure out like what is likely to happen here and maybe not gold plating
Right.
the technology. In other words, you may not, I mentioned S4HANA as an example a
Yes.
moment ago. You may not decide to go take on a big, complex, risky SAP project, knowing that you're just going to sell the company to someone else that may be using Oracle, in which case, that's not going to make a lot of sense. So I imagine that somehow influences your roadmap with it.
It does. And another real example, again, that we're just wrapping up. So it's this products company I was mentioning. They're carving out one of their product units. One of the divisions in the UK is using SAP, but ECC6, so legacy SAP. SAP, in fact, doesn't even want to sell licenses for that anymore. It's really difficult to kind of execute on that. So we were faced with the question, do we clone? We have the ability to clone that ECC6 environment and just kind of let it operate and we deal with that on another day? Or do we take the time, effort, and possible disruption to merge them into an in-flight Dynamics 365 project that's going on at the acquiring company? It's a little bit of a Sophie's choice of like, well, which one's going to be worse? The SAP clone is going to cost a lot of money, but it'll be stable. Or do we, rip the Band-Aid off and incorporate them into this in-flight Dynamics implementation and hope for the best? So those are some of the questions and the analysis that we have to work through, because there's not an easy answer in any of that.
Yeah. Now, what about the private equity firms themselves? I've worked with a few, just like you, and you guys work probably more with PE firms than we do. But in the experience I do have with PE firms, it's sort of all over the map in terms of expectations and their vision for how technology is going to fit into this acquisition or into this value creation. But how do they, just in general, how do PE firms view technology initiatives differently than the non-PE type of firm or the non-PE backed type of firm?
Yeah. Another good question, because and all PE firms are different. They don't all operate the same. So if you kind of think of it as on a continuum or on a spectrum, we've got some PE clients that are, you could almost argue, are just financial investors, right? They acquire an asset and they sit back and they're like, hey, management team, we bought you and we hired you for a reason because you're really good at running this company. Let us know if you need anything.
Right.
The other end of the spectrum, some PE firms will drop an operating partner or another staffer within the operations to, sort out their processes or digital transformation or other things, and actually hold a very active role within the organization. And then there's kind of everything in between. I think, again, what a lot of the motivations come are the couple of factors we probably deal with in every project is time, resources, and cost, right? And finding that balance of, again, staying true to the investment thesis and the value creation thesis that was set out when they made the investment in that asset, and balancing that with doing a good job on your digital transformation, but not doing the best job buying the top of the line. And again, I think what every PE firm and probably even strategic wants to avoid is what I call the perpetual implementation, the implementation that's never finished, because there's always another phase or another delay or another work stream coming.
I imagine it's hard for a PE firm to sell a company when it's in the middle of an implementation that may not be going so great, or that's turning into a money pit or whatever. That's exact opposite of what I imagine a PE firm wants to see. Yeah,
because we and that's what our clients really value from our point of view, is that we do a lot of due diligence projects on behalf of our PE firms. And we look for a lot of those red flags of an in-flight ERP project during a transaction. It's not to say you can't do it, but you can imagine where we're going to spend our time looking to make sure that project is healthy, it's on track, it had good kind of reasoning behind why they're going through that transition. And so there's a lot of scrutiny if you are trying to go through a transaction while you're mid-flight on a project. in some cases we work with our clients to advise them on, like, maybe they've acknowledged they have an incredible amount of technology debt. They have some legacy systems, they're on-prem, they're behind in patching. What we oftentimes would kind of rather see is we have a plan, and as soon as this transaction's done, we're ready to execute on the plan, and here's our plan. We're going to move to this system, we're going to address this issue, we're going to upgrade these systems. In some cases, that's more valuable than to be started on that transition, because depending on who the buyer is, they might have a different point of view, different opinion. And so now that might be kind of good money after bad, having started that transition only to have to course correct and go down a different path with the PE ownership.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'm here with Derek from West Monroe Partners. We're talking about digital transformations and ERP implementations in mergers and acquisitions, as well as private equity-backed firms. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you will want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. Just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes that we've ever published, going back to early 2021, episode 1. You can see it all there at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Derek Selchow talking about mergers and acquisitions and digital transformations in private equity-backed firms and ERP implementations of private equity-backed firms. I've got a lot more questions I want to get to, so let's jump back into it. Here's a really good question from Jordan on LinkedIn. Jordan says, how do you assess the digital maturity and readiness of a target company during an M&A process? And what strategies do you employ to ensure a seamless digital transformation post-acquisition to unlock value and drive growth? So basically, Jordan's asking you to give away the kings of the kingdom and just share everything you know about,
okay.
about M&A. Just kidding.
We'll go through the diligence report.
But I love the digital maturity, especially like how you assess the digital maturity, and maybe you could start by describing when you look at digital maturity, what does that mean? And secondly, how do you assess that, or how does a PE firm assess that as part of looking at an acquisition target?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as part of our typical process, we look at all sorts of factors. And again, we've been talking a lot about ERP, but it really kind of covers the gamut all the way from, CRM systems and lead generation systems through ERP, operational technology. But we also have practitioners within our firm that really dig into the cyber infrastructure, email, file sharing, like all of those technologies. And that's essentially the basis of our diligence reports, is basically a digital maturity kind of assessment on where we see that things are good, we don't really need to disrupt, or maybe there's struggles in certain areas, or maybe there's patching or security concern, and in some cases this also involves people. We make an assessment of the staff at the target company on, are they staffed appropriately? Is there a role that's missing? Is there some, maybe they have a blind spot within their organization, or maybe they're overstaffed, or maybe they are really a ripe candidate to go with a managed service provider rather than staffing up for various roles. So there's a whole formula and kind of analysis that we go through to really kind of assess that. And what's great about working with our private equity clients is they kind of keep us grounded and honest, rather than, and again, going into a diligence with the rose-colored glasses and saying, well, it's not perfect, and here's all the improvements we would make. We actually have to kind of like back up our recommendations with the why. So how does that support the investment thesis? How does that support where we want to take this company? And so that it's always a really good reminder as we're putting together kind of our best laid plans, kind of, again, reconciling that back to that investment thesis and the why we're even pursuing this particular transaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And building on that, I want to get to part 2 of Jordan's question here, which is really good too, which is, what strategies do you employ to ensure a seamless digital transformation post-acquisition to unlock value and drive growth? And I really want to hone in on that unlock value, drive growth. And I think, if we back up for a second, even if you're not a PE-backed firm, I think this is something that a lot of organizations should be thinking more about, is how do you unlock value? How do you drive growth? It's not just PE firms. It's not just M&As that should be driving that. So maybe just in general, how do organizations do that? Or what are some of the strategies you've seen work best to unlock that value and drive the growth?
Yeah. So in fact, right before we started this conversation, just got off of a call with a client where it's not an M&A transaction. We're actually leading a massive business transformation. All kinds of change is going to be introduced in this organization. They have a lot of pain points. They have a lot of things they're working on. And the meeting we just wrapped up was putting together that benefits case of all of the whys. And it's basically, it was a series or an entire list of all of the potential measures, KPIs, and the improvements we intend to see to justify kicking off this business transformation. So it is part change management, because that's really kind of a change management type of thought process of kind of gathering the vision and values, right? The vision being the kind of the thesis, if you will, and the value meaning what value drivers are we going to measure to prove that this was a valuable transition to go through, right? So we're not so much coming up with the metrics right now. We're coming up, what are we going to measure? Now, next step, now that we're aligned on what we're going to measure, our next step is to say, how are we going to measure it current state? And then kind of snap that as the baseline. And then what are we going to measure, future state, and how do we to measure it there? So it's really around kind of quantifying and measuring and tracking progress as we undertake all of these initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's sound advice for a company that's not going through an M&A or that's not PE-backed or whatever. And I think, a lot of times I think if organizations could spend more time acting like they're PE-backed or acting like they're about to go through an acquisition, I think it might change their mindset of how they approach these sorts of projects. Because generally, generally speaking, a PE-backed firm is going to cut out the waste. They're not going to waste a lot of time and money on an implementation. They're certainly not going to want to get into a money pit, and they're certainly not going to want to implement technology without creating value and that sort of thing. So I think that's a great mindset for any organization.
And it's really important too to just take the emotions and the brand affinities and all of these biases out of this process, right? And really get back to the metrics again. Not everything can be measured necessarily. Some of the benefits identified are a little bit more intrinsic, like improving user experience. Like, how do you really kind of measure that? But there are ways to measure that, or to gauge it, I should say. It's not necessarily scientific, but like there's a lot of kind of emotion and bias in projects that are this transformational, because it's like, well, I don't like Oracle. Like, I've heard that from clients who are like, we can do this, but it can't be an Oracle product, or it can't be an SAP product, because I have this preconceived notion on why, or I had a bad experience in my past. So, so there's a lot of those kind of non-measured reasons that we try to set by the wayside.
Or I've got this buddy down the street that told me that Oracle sucks, or whatever. You get these biases that don't always make sense, but it's good advice. Take the emotion and the bias out of it, and just look from a pure strategy and KPI perspective. And you're probably going to end up on the right path. Are there certain types of technologies? I know we've been talking a lot about ERP in general, but if we just sort of back up and not just focus on ERP and just talk about enterprise technology in general, any sort of business technology that a company might be deploying, are there certain types of technologies you find more suitable for these higher growth and M&A and PE-backed companies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. What I would say tends to be the norm, especially in a PE-backed company, is they shy away from the moonshots and the bleeding edge. They don't want to be the guinea pig. But they also don't want to be behind the times either, because that has a certain negative connotation as well. The next time they go through a transaction, you could be on 10-year-old technology and you thought it was the latest and greatest, but you're kind of seen as sort of behind the times. And the best example I can use is, and you probably had the same experience, 10 or more years ago, cloud computing was all the rage. I had so many CFOs tell me, no way over my dead body, my financial data is going to be in the cloud. I need to be able to keep my eyes on it and keep my hands around it. Well, that cloud has kind of, not to use a pun, but that cloud has passed. Companies are a lot more comfortable. In fact, cloud computing has a lot of benefits to get you out of that kind of management and infrastructure game, which has its own risks associated with it. When you own it, you have to manage it, right? The infrastructure and the security patches and all of that sort of thing. And so now that we've kind of gotten through that cloud computing conversation, of course, the next one is AI. There's a lot of misunderstanding about AI. It's probably one of the biggest buzzwords in the last 18 months or 2 years, and there's both excitement but also a little bit of trepidation, meaning, so we're just going to be dumping our information into this model, and God knows where it's hosted or where that data is going or who's looking at it, or is it getting stored? There's all those same kind of questions, but our clients are also kind of seeing the benefit of how that can really lighten the burden on a lot of these repetitive sort of tasks that their staff are really kind of going through, and also kind of highlighting insights in their data. I've seen a couple demos now of some AI applied to ERP systems where it's finding patterns that a human wouldn't know to go look for because of our own biases, right? Well, it's always this way. So I always look at these sales orders, and I always, the classic salesperson will say, that's our best customer. Yeah, but every product you sell them is at a negative margin. So are they your best customer? They're only your best customer because it's highest volume, but you lose money on every order you sell to them, just as an extreme example. But seeing this AI applied to these business transactions, it's highlighting insights that, a human would probably take several hours to try to come to some of those conclusions. So it's not an end all be all, like it's going to, solve world hunger and do all of these magical things, but it's a tool. And that's kind of how we treat it. AI is a tool that helps us do a better job, but it's not a replacement necessarily for anything. So I think that's kind of the latest in technology from these PE-owned firms. And then in addition, like if we're going to talk specifically maybe around manufacturing, it's kind of IoT on the shop floor or in a delivery vehicle or, on device management, and kind of that real-time stream of information that you can start to gather from your operations.
Yeah. Yeah. I just read an article last night. In fact, right before I went to bed, I'll read just to help me fall asleep. And I was reading Harvard Business Review, and there's an article about AI and how AI is not going to give companies competitive advantages, but AI is going to help companies that have existing competitive advantages just scale it up and become stronger in those areas. And I thought that was an interesting perspective and on their research that, it's not about using AI just to create some new advantage you don't already have. It's about, really doubling down on the ones you do have. So that's interesting. So when you look at implementations or just any sort of technology initiative within these environments, these M&A or PE-backed environments, what are some of the keys to success, and how does that look different than a company that's maybe not as high growth or that's not PE-backed?
Yeah, I would say, probably the number one consideration is timeline and a couple of factors. So timeline, not only of the project of we want to be done with this project, of course, I think everyone wants to be done with a project, but it's timeline also of when are we going to start seeing the value, right? So the way that kind of comes to life in these projects, again, it comes back to that change control now, not from the organizational change management perspective, but change control from the scope and the design and the reason we're undertaking this project. So it kind of takes almost sort of like a ruthless PMO to make sure that the scope stays in scope and the stakeholders don't start asking for things that are not a priority. So again, it goes all the way back to the beginning when the project kicked off, all aligning and agreeing to the scope, agreeing to the objective and the strategy behind it. So to not let all of those really distracting nice to haves kind of float their way in. And that's kind of an uncontrolled kind of change situation is what causes projects to be these perpetual implementations that I talk about, where you're plodding along and everything's tracking. Then you get into user acceptance testing, and if the folks helping with the user acceptance testing aren't aligned to the strategy and the objective, they're never going to find perfection in any of the tests, so they're going to fail them all, and then you're going to go back and rework. And a lot of the implementation consultants just want to do their best work and be responsive to their clients, so they'll make all kinds of changes and they'll test again and changes and test again. So there has to be leadership involved, and they all have to be aligned on what the goal line is and what we call a success, and decide to move on. And maybe it's something that can be addressed, in an optimization phase rather than in this initial phase. So getting it stood up, operating, because just as well as I do, in an implementation, we set out with all of these really good, lofty goals on all the improvements that this new system's going to bring us. But we all know in that first kind of post go live, we're going to see a dip in productivity. We're going to see a dip in efficiency because we're all still getting used to this new system and a new way of working and all of these other things. But we need to kind of work as hard as we can to come out of that dip. But that dip happens in every single implementation project. It's just a known factor. Our clients find it uncomfortable to talk about. They're like, well, what do you mean we're going to be less efficient? We're going to say, initially out of the box, yes, you're going to be less efficient because you're still getting used to this new way of working. And that's really the factor, is that change factor is like, now my world looks different. It's going to get better, but we got to get used to working in this new platform, new system.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm here with Derek from West Monroe Partners. We're talking about digital transformations and ERP implementations in mergers and acquisitions, as well as private equity-backed firms. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. Just go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes that we've ever published, going back to early 2021, episode 1. You can see it all there at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And I'm here with Selchow talking about mergers and acquisitions and digital transformations in private equity-backed firms and ERP implementations in private equity-backed firms. I've got a lot more questions I want to get to, so let's jump back into it. Segue into another thread, which is change management. You talked about people getting used to the technology and that sort of thing. Before I get into some of the more tactical change questions I have for you, just at a high level, when a company's PE backed or going through mergers and acquisitions, that's just a lot of change for an organization in general.
Yes.
Forget technology for a minute. It's just a lot's changing. We've got new ownership. We're probably reorganizing. We're probably changing processes. There's probably a culture shock because now all of a sudden we're focused on different metrics or whatever the case may be. What's the temperature of these organizations in general? I know everyone's different and it might vary wildly, but just in general, how would you summarize or generalize the temperature of an organization that you work with that is either PE backed or going through some merger or acquisition? Is it chaotic? Are people stressed out? Is it exciting? Like, how would you describe it?
Yeah, it really depends on the nature of where they are in their cycle. So the first example I'll use is a founder-owned business. He or she has grown it to such a level, and then now it's kind of time to cash their paycheck, so to speak, and sell to a buyer, whether it's PE or a strategic buyer. What we tend to see in a founder-owned organization where it was kind of scrappy, they built it themselves, they created this great organization, this great asset, there's quite the resistance to change, and they almost see it as, any suggestion of maybe a new platform, new system, or a different way of working is almost seen as an indictment of like, well, that's not what we used to do.
Right.
Because what we used to do worked and it got us here. And we kind of have a turn of phrase that is, what got you here is not going to get you there, right?
Right.
There's a reason you're going through this transition, and it's to grow and scale. And so everything that you did to build this thus far has been great, but that doesn't scale. And let's chart the course together, right? That doesn't always go smoothly because there is a lot of pride of ownership. Mm-hmm. Now, contrast that with a firm maybe that's on their third PE ownership, third PE sponsor. They're like, oh, okay, I've seen this playbook before. I kind of know, I know how this works. I know what kind of the overall objectives are. And so there's a little bit more comfort in kind of knowing how these cycles work when they've been through kind of multiple transactions, multiple transitions. So what we tend to see to kind of address that first scenario with the founder own is to plug in some leadership and some staff that's been through, a private equity cycle before to kind of build that knowledge base of what to expect when you're now owned by PE. And that tends to work really well because where we see it successful is when that person has been in the industry, but then so they have credibility. Otherwise, the walls go up, or like, oh, you're just a management consultant. Like, what do you even know how I run my business? But if they can find an industry operator that can kind of talk the talk with them, but then kind of guide them down the path of, how they're going to make life better and kind of chart that course, then that can allay a lot of those fears. But we don't always get granted with that benefit.
Yeah. I imagine that, you might have a similar experience where you see those employees that, like you said, it got us to where we are today. And oftentimes what got us to where we are today is a series of heroics and dependency on tribal knowledge and things that are really like human-based values. So in other words, if I have a crappy system and you don't give me any tools to do my job, but I somehow figure out how to do it and do it really well over the years, that's kudos to me, right? But the minute you start to bring in technology that's going to automate that and take that away from me, even though that's going to be better for the company, most likely, it's going to be a threat to me in the short term. So do you see that dynamic a lot where it's like, hey, I know the founder of the company. I was here from the very beginning and I helped us get here. And now all of a sudden this PE firm comes in, imposes all these new processes and technologies. And I could see that being a threat or sort of a short-term challenge for a lot of people within those organizations.
Yeah, I've seen that in practice where that said individual, friends with the founder or really close colleagues, decided, there's no ERP system commercially available that will fit our business. So I wrote our own.
Right.
Where, like, you had the best intentions, but a lot of times the advice we give those firms is like, you're not in a software development business. Like, you're a manufacturer or you're a distributor, right? So you don't have necessarily the software development skills to actually run a proper software development, organization, even though you felt that like you developed your own ERP system that's perfect for the way that you do business right now, right? And that's really kind of something that we are on the lookout for, is like, yeah, it's perfect for the right now, but it's not going to continue to scale and grow. And there's a real support risk, or a key person risk is the other thing that we tend to call out in diligence as well. Is there someone that's got all the knowledge trapped in their brain and like they hold the keys, and if anything happens to them, like, we're going to be really in trouble. That can happen even with commercial software, or like, as you probably know too, with integrations, right? They have a really complex kind of Byzantine kind of integration environment, and there's like one person that knows how to restart all the SQL jobs to keep making everything kind of run on time. That's a risk as well. It's all about kind of sharing that knowledge and taking that pressure off that person, because we've seen it in cases where that person hasn't had a vacation in 5 years because they're not allowed to leave or take a break.
Yeah, business will shut down or come to a screeching halt because that person went on vacation or decides to retire. What about, so when a PE company or a parent company comes in to buy another company, usually they're doing it because they see some competitive advantage or some competitive differentiator in that acquisition target. So when you think about commercial off-the-shelf software, though, that's sort of a not a generic technology, but they're standard technologies that are accessible to anyone. So how do you balance that sort of standardizing using off-the-shelf software that any other competitor could use versus preserving that competitive advantage, whatever it is? Do you find a tension ever between that, like the standardization of off-the-shelf software sort of potentially diluting that competitive advantage versus that IT guy or gal that built that homegrown system that's specific to this company that helps them enable their competitive advantage? How do you find that balance between let's not be a software company, but also let's not completely dilute our competitive advantage? How do you navigate that?
Right. I think where we've had the most success with that is working really hard to get that, that person or that team that has this pride of ownership in this, said homegrown system, to use them as part of the process, meaning they have a lot of institutional knowledge about how things operate and how things work and where a lot of the value in a lot of their processes are. And so getting them on the team early to actually help with the requirements definition process is really, really important, because they're also the ones that can kind of help us find any gaps in some of these processes. And we can, if we're successful at it, really help them kind of see the future of, okay, in this one case, that process you're following might be inefficient. Maybe there's a different way of executing on that, but still getting the same result, right? But it really comes back down to kind of education and helping them kind of see the light, so to speak, with data and with evidence, and getting them comfortable with that process, but including them in the requirements definition, because they're a real asset to that whole process. No one, we had a term we used to use is, you don't want to have an ERP system done to you. We want it done with you, right? Because at the end of the day, all the consultants get to leave when the project's done, and you're going to be left there with the system to manage and with all the care and feeding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. So what about PE-backed companies that are getting started on their digital transformations? What are some of the first steps that you typically advise clients on to kind of get started on their journeys if they're PE-backed and or going through a merger or acquisition?
Yeah. So after the transaction closes and they are now the owners, a lot of times what we'll do is kind of dust off our diligence report. Again, that was rooted in their investment thesis, and our advice in there is oftentimes kind of aligned to what they are hoping to do with this new acquisition. And we like to go back and kind of reconfirm the assumptions that were made in all of that. Has anything changed from an investment thesis perspective? What do they see on the horizon for possible tuck-in acquisitions? Various kind of factors like that, and work with them and the management team to kind of sit down and, one of the best things I like to do when we have the chance is actually walk through our diligence report with the management team. So in the transaction life cycle, when we're going through a diligence, the diligence is a deliverable that we owe to the private equity firm. It doesn't belong to the target company being acquired necessarily. And in a well-run organization, after the transaction closes, the PE firm will sit down with the management team and kind of share the findings that came out of all the diligence providers, quality of earnings and legal and all of them. We really like to have that opportunity to kind of walk through our analysis and our justification with the management team. And again, part of it's a people part of the equation, to kind of get them kind of thinking the way that we put our advisory report together, to kind of help them on that journey. So we're not always just calling their baby ugly. We want to kind of walk through the reasoning and kind of show the receipts, if you will, to kind of justify where we're coming from. And that goes a long way to kind of getting them in the boat, so to speak, to get on board with what's being suggested. And then through that process, they may have even had some of their own, epiphanies, because they've probably been diligenced by 3, 4, 5 firms, all asking similar questions. And so the management teams that are paying attention are like, every one of these firms asked about why we have an out of support ERP system in the server closet, behind the reception desk.
Right.
That's probably an issue, since they all kind of like honed in on it and asked
Right.
questions for 30 minutes. That's probably an issue.
Right.
So the light bulb kind of goes off. But yeah, reviewing that advisory report with the management team is a really valuable exercise, so that they get a sense where we're coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And identifying where the risks are, and because those reports typically are showing why there's an interest in the company, but it's also showing what the concerns are, the risks, or the opportunities for value creation that maybe haven't been tapped into yet. So really understanding that up front, I could see it sort of gives you a clear direction of where to go.
And the competitive nature too of it is these management teams and these companies, they like to know how they stack up against other companies. Like how are we doing? It's almost kind of like a classroom environment, right? Like, how does our report card look versus the student sitting next to me? It's kind of a similar sort of competitive thing. It's like, how do we stack up? Like, where are we on that journey? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I think, again, back to the point I made earlier, that your point we were talking about earlier is, even a non-PE backed company, if you could think that way, think about, how you might position yourself for a sale, or how you might maximize the value of your organization. That should be the guiding light for how you deploy technology. It's not because SAP told you you've got to get off ECC by 2027 or else they're going to stop support. That's not a good enough reason. I mean, that might be the impetus for why you go through the project, but you've got to take it a lot further than that and say, okay, well, let's think like a PE firm here now. Like, what do we do to manage risk? How are we going to manage cost, time, resources? What's the business value? What are the KPIs? What's the strategy? All that stuff. And if you start going with that mentality, even if you're not PE backed, that's going to help tremendously. And I don't think enough companies do that, in my opinion. All right. Thanks, Derek. Great conversation. Appreciate having you here today. And so much good content there that Darian and I are going to debrief on a couple things here and sort of build on some of the things that you shared with us. So thank you for that great conversation. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll expand on some of the things that Derek and I just spoke about. But we're also going to, after that, share with you some lessons from ChatGPT as it relates to digital transformation. So if AI said it, it must be true and it must be real. So let's see what ChatGPT has to tell us about that. But we're going to get to all that here in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Just tell me what you've got to say to me. I've been waiting for so long to hear.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. This is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski, and you can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So, Darian, we just had Derek from West Monroe Partners on the show. We talked about mergers and acquisitions and private equity-backed firms and some of the nuances that make these sorts of projects unique, especially when compared to companies that aren't going through a merger or acquisition. So what were some of your thoughts or takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I think first of all, just seeing all the different sides of, mergers or acquisitions or PE-backed firms compared to just a company that isn't going through that kind of situation. And, the challenges or the different things that they face with that. I think it was super interesting to learn from him what he sees kind of on the daily basis with that. But I did want to get your take on a couple of things with these types of companies as well. First of all, how do you think that private equity-backed firms view initiatives differently from other firms?
Yeah, so my experience is similar to what Derek had said. I mean, a couple of things. One is he talked about how PE firms don't want a gold-plated ERP implementation, and I think that's really a good way to put it. I had never said it that way, but I like the way he summarized that, and that's very true in my experience too. They don't want to spend a ton of time and money overcomplicating things or making it perfect or trying to automate every nook and cranny of the business. They just want to focus on let's get the maximum business value for the lowest cost and least amount of time. So, they just have a different expectation in terms of not wanting that gold-plated, super expensive Cadillac version of a transformation. The other piece of it too that I've noticed with the PE firms we work with is a lot of times unless it's a really big company, multi-billion-dollar company that they know is going to get acquired, or that they are targeting to be acquired by a super multi-billion-dollar company. I'm going to set that aside for a second and say, let's assume they're not one of those really big companies. Chances are pretty high a PE firm's not going to want to go through like a big, massive SAP implementation or an Oracle implementation. Chances are higher that they're going to want more of maybe a middle tier sort of solution that, yes, is very stable and strong and can add a lot of value, but also is likely to get replaced by another system. Because you just have no way of knowing who's going to buy you or who you're going to merge with in the future, and you have no way of knowing what kind of system that parent company is using. So their view of what kinds of technologies they want to use is a little bit down market, I'd say, because they don't want the big, complicated, expensive, risky implementations. Now, the caveat to that is if you're a big multinational or a big multinational, multi-billion-dollar company, and you're likely to get acquired by a $100 billion plus company or whatever, chances are pretty high that $100 billion plus company is going to be running an SAP or an Oracle, for example. In which case you might actually gravitate towards an SAP or an Oracle with the assumption that you could maybe a little bit more easily plug into, a big giant conglomerate that might also be running SAP and want to buy you at that point. So I think, just the mindset of PE firms in that way is a little bit different. And that might be a little bit unique to PE firms and high growth companies. But a lot of the other stuff that Derek and I talked about is I'd say relevant to any sort of organization.
That makes sense. And there was a question at the end there that got asked that I don't believe we had time to get through, so I grabbed it quick for us. This one is, how have you seen mergers where technology was not addressed in the first 3 years and PE and merged remained on their current systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually have had some PE backed companies that are clients of ours that have done just that. They've said, we're not going to put in a new system because we know we're just going to have to rip it out and replace it again in the future. So rather than do that, we're just going to upgrade and optimize what we've got. So even if it's an old system or whatever, they might just sort of fine tune it. Some might say, hopefully this doesn't offend anyone, but the old cliche of putting lipstick on a pig. It's sort of like you're putting lipstick on a pig, you're prettying it up, you're making it look good and good enough to get acquired, and then you're going to rip that system out and replace it with whatever the parent company or the buying company wants you to use. So that's probably, that's commonly what we see in the market.
Yeah, that makes sense. Overall, I thought it was a really great conversation. I really like the topic. I feel like it brought a different perspective of things that maybe I didn't know before, especially for merger and acquisitions and private equity companies on, their digital transformation side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so great conversation there. And again, thanks to the audience for the great questions. Thanks to Derek for being here. We're going to shift gears now, though, and play you a clip of a video that I recently published on my YouTube channel where I talk about ChatGPT and what ChatGPT taught me about our own clients here at Third Stage. So what I did is I went through my client notes from the last 20 new clients that I've spoken with over the last few weeks. And every week I talk to maybe 3 or 5 new companies, that are either existing clients or they're interested in becoming a client of Third Stage. And I take super detailed notes. I actually pride myself on the detailed notes I take because otherwise I'll forget, what I heard. I'm very visual, so I have to write it down. So anyway, so I take lots of detailed notes, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to like plug all my notes into ChatGPT and just tell me what you see. Like, what are the patterns you see? What are the top themes that you're seeing in these notes? And so I did just that and plugged in the last 20 conversations, plugged it into ChatGPT, had it spit out 8 things that it taught me basically about our own clients. So with that, let's play you this clip and then we'll come back and chat about what it means and some of the takeaways. I talk on any given week to about 3 to 5 new clients and potential clients throughout the world. And I always keep mental track of what kinds of lessons I'm picking up on, what kind of patterns am I hearing, what are some of the solutions we could offer to this one particular client to help them solve their specific problem. But I also like to look at just broader patterns. What are some of the trends we're seeing in the market? So what I wanted to do is plug in my notes from the last 20 clients I talked to and see what AI tells me about it. What are some of the patterns it picks up on? What are some of the themes that come from that? And when I took the last 20 clients I'd spoken with, and I do take copious notes anytime I talk to a new client, I found that, first of all, there's a wide range of clients. They were all over the world, some of them in North America, some were in Europe, some were in South America, some were in Asia Pacific as well. So really good representation from all over the world. The clients I talked to range anywhere from 50 employees to 50,000 employees, and most of them were in a number of different industries, a lot of manufacturing, some construction, some services firms, all different kinds of industries. And most of them were replacing some sort of legacy system as part of their digital transformation, ranging from SAP ECC to JD Edwards to QuickBooks to Bond. There's a lot of different systems that they were trying to replace. And these are the 8 things that AI told me were the most common themes in those last 20 conversations. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. One of the most common themes that AI picked up on was the fact that most of these organizations were outgrowing their legacy systems. On the surface, that might not sound that surprising, but in some ways it is, because it was a common theme that we saw was that organizations weren't just replacing technology to get ahead or to do something super strategic. They were doing it simply because they outgrew their old systems. They had grown so much that the old system was constraining their future growth and scalability. So scale was one of the big things that AI picked up on, and the fact that organizations could no longer operate and function the way they wanted to while maintaining their growth going forward. Another common theme that AI picked up on when I plugged in my notes from client conversations were the cultural shifts that organizations were planning to go through. And this is actually a surprising one because it wasn't something I picked up on when I was talking to these clients. I didn't realize how prevalent that undertone was, that organizations were really struggling with how to change their culture. In many cases, they're trying to change their culture to act like a bigger company, or change their culture to act like one company instead of multiple entities or multiple business units. It might have been a cultural shift to increase innovation and be more nimble and agile as an organization. So a lot of cultural shifts were going along with most of these digital transformations, which made it very clear to me that these projects are not technology initiatives, and clients were coming to us not as a technology first initiative, but more as how do we change our culture, how do we change our business, how do we change our organization to support our business goals and growth going forward. And this is something that's very refreshing because in the past, especially early in my career, I'd say more organizations were focused just on the technical aspects of implementation. So cultural shifts and cultural changes is one of the biggest things that AI taught me about these 20 clients. When AI analyzed my notes of client conversations, growing pains is one of the most common themes it picked up on. Organizations were struggling with growth. They were going through growing pains, partially because they had outgrown their technology and their legacy systems, but also because just as an organization and operationally in general, they were experiencing growing pains. So this really put things in context for me too, because now you're looking at technology as a way to really scale the organization. And again, it gets us more focused on the business outcome and the business value we're looking for. We're not just doing this because our vendor told us we had to sunset our product or that we had to get off the old platform by a certain date. We're looking at how can we use this technology to really enable business processes and organizational enhancements that help us scale for growth going forward. So those growing pains are something that also point out the fact that change management is so important, because we're not just putting in new technologies, we've got to ensure that people come along for the ride and that we address their growing pains as well. Another interesting finding that AI taught me about the client notes that I entered into it were that data integration and data accessibility were two of the big themes that organizations were struggling with. They're trying to find a way to get better visibility into data and really get to information. They're not just looking for reports. They're not just looking for historic, backward-facing numbers. They're looking for insights and to help them really understand their business. And so many organizations that I talk to on any given week or any given month have situations where they have systems and data that are in silos. And those system and data in silos create a situation where you have people that have to manually go find that data, go manipulate it, go put it together, and go make sense of it all. And that's a very time-consuming process that not only is inefficient, but it's prone to human error, and it's more likely that you're going to get information too late to really be able to do anything informative with it. So ensuring that we have integration between systems and with data, that's another thing that AI taught me about these clients that I've recently spoken with. We're playing you a video of what ChatGPT taught us about our clients here in recent months. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to continue playing you this clip here in just a moment. Be sure to stick around. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. Hi, this is Eric Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting, and I want to invite you to join our annual tech agnostic conference called Digital Stratosphere. Digital Stratosphere is a conference that features some of the industry's brightest minds, greatest thinkers, and it's a great opportunity to network with peers, other industry people, other CIOs, other project team members that are going through digital transformations or ERP implementations. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. It's a 3-day event, a lot of great entertainment, networking opportunities. I'll be there as one of the keynote speakers, along with some of my favorite speakers in the industry as well, both within Third Stage Consulting, but also outside the company as well. So I encourage you to check it out and learn more. You can go to stratosphere2024.com to learn more about the event. You can see the agenda, the way it's shaping up, and you can see some of the past testimonials of people that have attended. And the event is October 2nd through the 4th, 2024. It's going to be based in Denver, Colorado, downtown Denver, beautiful downtown Denver in the fall, which is a great time to visit Denver if you haven't been. Again, stratosphere2024.com. Check out the agenda. Check out our early bird pricing for passes. And the other beautiful things, if you can't be here in person in Denver, which we hope you can, but if you can't, you can also join remotely as well. We have virtual passes available as well, so you're able to join from wherever in the world you might want to join from. So stratosphere2024.com, check it out, and I hope to see you there.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 188. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski, and we're playing you this clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about 8 lessons from ChatGPT about some of the client notes that I plugged into it recently. Let's continue rolling the clip here. AI also taught me that a majority of clients I speak with are really struggling with how to manage consultants and software vendors. They were trying to figure out how can we make sure that we have visibility into what the consultants are doing, that we have control over the consultants and the software vendors, and that we ultimately have the buy-in and ownership of the project internally within our own organizations rather than outsourcing the entire project to an outside third party. And to be fair, this is something that we provide to our clients, and it's a service that we provide, which is why so many clients contact us, is because they want control and they want to have ownership of the project and they want to manage their consultants and their software vendors, and that's something that we empower our clients to do, and we give them the tools to do that. So there might be a little bit of bias in the data because by definition more clients are coming to us for that service, but that was a major theme that AI picked up on, was that organizations really want to figure out how to manage their software vendors and their consultants as part of their transformation rather than being controlled by the consultants and software vendors. One of the most surprising things that AI taught me about the subset of client notes that I plugged into the model is just how important regulatory compliance is. Now, of course, I understand that regulatory compliance is important to any business, especially some of the clients in the subset that do food and beverage manufacturing or construction or other highly regulated types of businesses. But what was really interesting is how many of these organizations were struggling to get to regulatory compliance with their current systems, and they're worried about maintaining a certain amount of regulatory compliance with their new systems. And I guess in my mind, going into this exercise, I would have thought that regulatory compliance was just a foregone conclusion. You're going to have it, the systems are going to have it built. But one thing I learned by reading the results from AI is that so many clients talked about how the regulations are changing so much in the world that their systems couldn't keep up with those changes. So that's something that's really important, is to recognize that in some ways, when you're going through a digital transformation, it's almost like you're trying to hit a moving target, because regulations are changing, the world is changing, your operational needs, your customer needs are all changing, and regulatory compliance is certainly one of those things you want to make sure you get right as part of your digital transformation. People and human challenges are another thing that AI picked up on when I plugged in my client notes. One of the underlying threads that AI picked up on is how important people and human challenges are to organizations. And this is refreshing as well, because I've always believed that people and human challenges are one of the biggest sources of problems and challenges with implementations. But I also have always felt as though organizations don't fully recognize that until they get far into their implementations, in many cases until it's too late. So it's refreshing to see that AI picked up on the fact that people and human challenges really are an underlying thread and sort of an undercurrent in people's worries and goals that they're trying to accomplish as part of their digital transformation. And this is part of why organizational change, training, communications, all that stuff is so important to make a project successful, because chances are pretty high that even though most organizations are thinking about people and human challenges, I would argue that even then they still don't fully understand the full breadth of how big those people challenges will be as they get through their digital transformation. Another surprising lesson I learned from AI's analysis of my client notes is just how important fiscal realities and financial justifications are. And on one hand, it's not surprising that organizations are concerned about cost. They don't want to blow their bank account or blow their budget and not be able to deliver what was promised within the time frame and the budget that was expected. But that part's not surprising. But what was surprising was the fact that so many organizations are now focusing more on financial justification. They're not just looking at the cost side of the equation. They're looking at how do we make sure that whatever we invest delivers an ROI. And I would say maybe 5 or 10 years ago, that wasn't as common as what we're seeing now. And I think part of that is because economic turmoil, economic uncertainty, certain parts of the world and certain industries are going through layoffs and financial challenges. So they're a bit more sensitive to justifying the finances and the cost of these sorts of implementations. But the good news is it's getting organizations to focus on the outcome. What is it they want to get on the other side of a transformation? What do they want to be when they grow up? And how do they see this adding value to their business, rather than just viewing this as a big, massive money pit that's just going to cost money without necessarily delivering value? So if we can stay focused on that and deliver to it, that's good news for organizations throughout the world. So those are the 8 things that AI taught me about my own notes from talking to 20 different customers. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, though. What would you add to the list if you were to predict what AI would have told you from my notes or from your experience with digital transformations? I'd love to hear your comments in the comments field below. So Darian, we just played this video clip of some of the lessons from ChatGPT as it relates to our clients. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that video once you saw it?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think it just showcases the power that AI, like ChatGPT especially, is starting to get, where it can pick up on patterns, like you said, that maybe you didn't even recognize at first with your notes or with thinking about your past 20 clients. So I think with that information, I think you can leverage it in a lot of different ways, which is really nice. Were you expecting AI/ChatGPT to be able to pick up on the patterns as well as it did? Or what were you kind of expecting going into this?
I had no idea what to expect. Honestly, I was prepping for a batch of videos that I knew I was going to film that day. And so I just thought, well, let me take my notes and just see, if I could summarize what I'm hearing in the market. And I started doing it myself manually. And I thought, why don't I just plug it into ChatGPT and see what it says, and it'll give me the outline for my video. So that was ultimately why I did it. And but to answer your question, I was sort of surprised at how well it sort of picked up on the themes. And what was interesting is some of the themes, like, it sort of resonated with me, and I thought, yeah, that's sort of what I thought too after reading those 20 sets of notes. But there were some other things I was like, wow, I didn't really pick up on that. I can't remember which one. I think it was the regulatory piece, for example. that was one that I just didn't, obviously the clients talked about regulations and regulatory compliance and that being an important thing. But I suppose in my mind, I might have underestimated that, not because regulatory compliance isn't important, but because I always think of it as sort of an afterthought, like not an afterthought, but you assume that new technology is going to help you be compliant from a regulatory perspective. But what we're learning from ChatGPT, looking at my notes, is that's not the case, is that there are still regulatory compliance issues, both for companies that are trying to deploy new technologies, but also ones that have already deployed newer technologies, and they're trying to get the most value out of it. So that's just one example of something that was surprising that I did not pick up on qualitatively from reading the notes.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Do you think that, I know you scrub sensitive information, and obviously you have to do that right now with, it being a public AI and everything. But do you think in the future you're able to use AI in different ways to maybe understand clients' needs better, or just look at it from a different perspective?
I think so. I mean, I think especially when you talk about business processes and workflows and process mining, we use a process mining and business process management tool as part of our consulting engagements. I could see us being able to take that and use AI to sort of help us not just qualitatively pick up on where the bottlenecks are, where the inefficiencies are, where the opportunities for improvement are, but also using AI to help identify some of those things. Maybe, like I said, like in the example of the regulatory compliance piece of it, it's not that I didn't know the regulatory compliance was important, but it's that I didn't realize how big of a deal that was to those 20 clients, or at least, a big subset of those 20 clients. So I could see AI maybe helping shine a light on some of the blind spots that we have as humans. And we as consultants, we're not perfect, and we do have blind spots, as demonstrated by the example I just gave with regulatory compliance. So, it's, I think AI could be almost like not a coach, but it's almost like you've got a second person, like another set of eyes to kind of validate what you're thinking and maybe give you some additional ideas. So, and it's a super cost-effective extra set of eyes too.
For sure. Yeah. Super cost effective. I think another way that I know we've kind of chatted about before potentially, but I think even with you doing this exercise with clients proves that even in the hiring process, or if you're looking for hiring, you can plug in resumes or cover letters or notes that you take from interviews and stuff like that, and then really have AI break everything down and see if it would be a good potential fit for your company.
Yeah, like tell me the strengths and weaknesses of this candidate on paper, at least. It's AI won't tell you the cultural side of it, which to me is, for us at third stage, that's at least half of the value of a candidate is the cultural fit. But it could tell you the other half, which is, do they have the right skill set? What blind spots do they have? What challenges might this person have fitting into what we need from them skill set wise? So absolutely, there's so many different ways that you could be using AI just on a small scale, and those small examples can add up to a lot of efficiency gains.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was a really good example and exercise I think you did. I'm glad that you did it, because I think I learned how to maybe use AI in a different way that could be beneficial for a lot of things.
Well, very cool. Well, thanks for that, and thanks for your great follow-up questions there. Thank you to the audience for being here today and the great questions you all have had. Thank you to our guest, Derek Selchow from West Monroe Partners, for being here to talk about transformations in M&A and private equity-backed firms. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday. Go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. If you just can't wait until next Wednesday when our next episode comes out, go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can watch all 187 past episodes, ones you've missed, or if you want to watch them again, you certainly can. They're all out there archived on transformationgroundcontrol.com. Again, the show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, an independent consulting firm that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. And if you'd like to learn more about Third Stage, you can reach out to myself. You've got my contact information in the show notes below, wherever you're listening or watching. Be sure to reach out if you've got questions you want to chat about how we can help you through your transformation. Show is produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn how to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Mindy at majortom-productions.com, and her information is included in the show notes below as well. So thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week on Transformation Ground Control.